Okay, well, I think we can get started. I want to say good afternoon and thank you for joining us today. My name is Carter Allagood. I run academic sales here at Capsim. Today we're going to talk about assessing and developing ethical decision-making skills with students. First, I want to speak briefly about Capsim and then introduce CapsimInbox to you guys. It's a recently released simulation we're quite excited about. And then Dr. Deerdorf will give us a comprehensive overview of the most recent version of CapsimInbox, ethical decision making. So for years, Capsim has been creating business simulations that help our clients develop and measure hard skills like business acumen and strategic management. Students who use these tools to better understand how different functions of a business work together and to practice making business decisions in a risk-free environment, competitive environment. These simulations apply across a wide range of course types. It's used in Introduction to Business, Principles of Management, all the way up to managerial accounting, finance, and strategic management. If you're interested in learning about any of these simulations and how they can be used in your class, we'd be happy to show them to you. We work closely with our professors to continually improve our products. And when we speak with them, a question kept popping up. The question was, how can we measure the harder to measure skills like leadership, communication, and organization? How can we do this in a realistic, fun, and effective way? We spent some time talking about it internally and with a number of our clients, and we ended up developing our newest simulation, CapsimInbox. CapsimInbox is an immersive simulation. It shows participants a day in the life of a manager. It presents to the students a common communication platform. It displays a series of emails, instant messages, and a file drive full of information that they need to make decisions. We present to the student a wide range of complex items, and if you choose to put additional pressure on them, you can also give them a limited amount of time to deal with these items. We evaluate a few things: how participants prioritize the messages they receive, and also how they choose to reply and how they choose to respond to those messages. We have multiple versions of Inbox, all developed by experts in the field. I'm going to talk about the other versions at the end of this webinar, and I also want to describe how you can work with us to build your own version of Inbox. But before we get into that, I'm pleased to introduce one of these experts in the field who has helped in the development and validation in the latest version of CapsimInbox, ethical decision making. Dr. Eric Deerdorf is here to give us an overview of our new application. He is a professor of management at DePaul University and a recognized expert in assessment and development at both the individual and team levels. Over to you, Dr. Deerdorf.
Thank you, Carter. It's my pleasure to be here today and discuss this new CapsimInbox platform. As someone who's been responsible for teaching business ethics content in my courses at both the undergraduate and graduate levels for a number of years, I clearly recognize the need for better tools to improve student success and the success of faculty such as ourselves. The issue of business ethics gets plenty of attention in the media, especially when the lack of ethics is at issue, of course. Yet if we take a step back and we think about business ethics in relation to our primary stakeholders, which would be our students, we'll see there's substantial value in developing ethics-related skills. For example, in several large-scale surveys of employers, attributes such as integrity, ethics, critical thinking, problem-solving, and leadership are routinely listed as top attributes that are highly desirable. Moreover, these very same attributes are those that employers remark as quite rare among our graduates. There's also a wealth of research that shows the consequences for others when people choose to engage in ethical leadership. For example, ethical leadership has been linked to more trust and higher quality relationships, higher job satisfaction and commitment to the company, and lower counterproductive work behavior, which is our fancy academic way of summarizing things like sabotage, theft, absenteeism, and so forth. On the flip side, there's an awful lot of research as well that links unethical forms of leadership to negative outcomes like increased resistance, intentions to quit, lower job performance, as well as well-being. And so if we really step back and think about this, these sorts of ethical decision-making related skills link not only to the immediate employability of our students in the short term, but as well as their long-term promotability as they progress throughout their careers. As business schools, we certainly seem to acknowledge the importance of business ethics. And if we look at our mission statements, they frequently reference the idea of responsible leadership. Virtually every business school has a learning goal that speaks to some sort of effective problem solving or decision making, business ethics, social responsibility. And you can see this evidenced here in some of these business school learning goals I'm showing right here that are pulled down from real examples, where things such as ethical and leadership issues need to be recognized, the ability to incorporate ethical principles and responsible leadership into resolving management situations, and also the idea of skills around decision making and critical thinking. So if you kind of step back and think about how do we do this in business schools, how do we sort of teach these kinds of skills and fulfill these types of learning goals, it really does present some challenges. From my own experience over the years, as well as helping others develop assessment and curriculum at other universities, it really seems to be 4 key challenges that need to be met when it comes to effectively inculcating ethics-related skills. The first is we really need to move from theory to application. So we're talking about not simply teaching about theory or the students learning about utilitarianism, universalism, and so forth, but actually how these theories relate to real problem solving. A second challenge is emphasizing decision-making skills, right? So here we're talking about a focus on the ethical decision-making process, helping students move from not just knowing about ethics, but actually doing ethics and ethical decision-making. And of course, this also presents the challenge of allowing opportunities for our students to practice in the safe environment that is the educational setting. So I imagine many of you out there have your favorite case studies that deal with business ethics, but these really need to be augmented with realistic experiences to practice. I know most of my favorite case studies that I use are really set at the upper echelons of organizations, stories about decisions, good and bad, at the C-suite level. But what about the kinds of ethical issues that are faced by everyday employees and managers? How can we provide these kinds of high-fidelity, realistic opportunities to practice to our students? And last but not least, the 4th key challenge is the idea around providing actionable feedback. So not only teaching and driving up these skills, but providing feedback to students that's developmental in nature. We need to find a better way to help them acquire these skills and understand where they're currently at and where they need to be in the future. And so this kind of brings me to this newest platform that Capsim has called CapsimInbox Ethical Decision Making. You know, we've kind of laid the groundwork here for why ethical decision making and the related skills are important, not only to our primary stakeholders of students, but also stakeholders such as the employing organizations. You know, I like to provide a brief walkthrough here so you can get a feel for the student experience and the value that this tool can provide to students and faculty. So let's just begin with kind of the foundational information. You might be asking, well, what's actually assessed in CapsimInbox? The focus, again, of CapsimInbox Ethical Decision Making is on the decision-making process. So we're really focusing in on 5 key ethical decision-making skills. These 5 skills were derived from the past 2.5 decades of scholarship around ethical decision-making. And these skills, you can see them up on screen. Skills around recognizing ethical issues, so how well you perceive or detect the hallmarks of an ethical dilemma. Investigating facts, so this is how well one gathers, explores, and examines all the relevant information for a given situation or problem. Skills around identifying stakeholders, so how well you can identify primary individuals or groups that are going to be impacted by a decision, and what are your central obligations to each of these groups. Skills around generating multiple solutions, so expanding the solution set around several alternatives and using effective decision-making techniques to do so. And finally, evaluating the consequences of these alternatives, so how well you can examine the likely outcomes of the different alternatives that are generated. And are you evaluating these alternatives against common ethical criteria like equity, equality, need, and importantly, the feasibility and risk of each of these alternatives? So the scholarship on ethical decision-making sort of lays out these 5 key skills as part of an ethical decision-making process. The same scholarship also tells us there are several common situations in business that present potential ethical issues. So CapsimInbox integrates these situations as well, and these include situations that present conflicts of interest, where the objectivity of your judgment is compromised or appears compromised to others. There's situations that deal with information confidentiality. So here the idea of the obligations to protect the privacy of information or those who provide it. There's also situations around individual rights and responsibilities, situations that present a concern for ensuring individual rights of equal opportunity, freedom from harassment, dignity, and so forth. And finally, situations that deal with use or misuse of resources. So the responsible use of company resources such as money, property, and even corporate reputation. So now we've had a chance to kind of look at the conceptual foundation of CapsimInbox. Let's take a quick look at the student experience to try to give you a feel for what students see. So CapsimInbox is designed to be completely self-directed. This means as a faculty member, you can choose to be as involved as you would like to be. And as you'll see here, students, once they register, they come to a very easy to follow dashboard and process. There's clear steps outlined across the top that they walk through as they participate in this exercise. There's a video that they watch, a short video that immerses them into the simulated experience, gives them information about what it's going to be like, what's going to happen, and talks about how their role in the simulated experience is a day in the life of a manager, as Carter alluded to earlier. Next, they progress into a self-assessment. And the self-assessment is a key part of this process. Here, they're self-evaluating their levels of these 5 key ethical decision-making skills. This is absolutely essential to development because it allows students to see and identify their gaps in their self-views. You'll see these ratings come back in later when I show you some of the feedback reports that are kicked off by CapsimInbox. So after they do the brief self-evaluation, then there's a short onboarding. Here's the idea. They go through and they practice with the interface a bit to get familiar with the tool itself. And once they kind of play around and get used to and familiar with the interface, then they can proceed into the assessment environment. So let's take a look at that interface itself. So as Carter alluded to earlier, the inbox interface looks like a common communication platform that they would see in real life. So you have sections where there's a file drive, there's an email list, a reading pane, instant messages come piped in along the top. So it's a very familiar environment to the students. And in this environment, students are presented with various emails, instant messages, drive files, and all of these communications present requests, problems, decisions to be made, many of which contain ethically sensitive issues. And what makes this a higher fidelity experience is that, you can see up here we have instant messages coming in. All of the messages and emails are customized to the student, him or herself. So you can see my name is being piped in to this email here on screen. You'll also notice as they're working through these different emails and instant messages that they have to choose from a set of responses. So they have to choose from the optimal answer from this response set. This design feature is intentional in order to improve measurement precision, as well as to allow immediate feedback upon completion. So students aren't manually typing in open-ended responses. They're actually choosing from various answers. Some emails present more than one right answer, and the idea is you choose the optimal response. And so students work through all of these emails and messages until they address each and every one of them. And some of these messages require them to look into the file drive. Other emails may be sort of FYI messages that are from leadership or customers that they have to use to answer other emails. It creates this immersive, interactive environment that Carter alluded to earlier. So the assessment's designed to take less than 60 minutes to finish. The Capsim folks have told me that the average completion time is sitting at around 44 minutes to do. So you can deliver this easily in one sitting. It can be assigned as a homework assignment, these sorts of things, because it's delivered online. After completing the assessment, students are sort of notified the assessment's been completed, and then they can view a detailed feedback report. So what's interesting about this feedback report, as an administrator, you can determine when to release this feedback report. So, for example, if you prefer to debrief the exercise yourself in class prior to distributing the feedback report, you can choose to do so. And so this, again, the CapsimInbox experience is designed to be self-directed and self-guided. So even when they're receiving this detailed feedback report, there's a lot of different information that's provided and a lot of explanation. So they're given scores about their overall performance. And incidentally, the scores are all relative percentile-based scores, which is the way you want to deliver developmental feedback. They'll also get information around how well they address ethical issues across those various situations we talked about, conflict of interest, use of resources, and so forth. Here again, their self-ratings are reintroduced in a self-awareness index that gives them customized feedback of how accurate they are in their assessment of skills and whether or not they tend to overrate or underrate if they're inaccurate. And last but not least, the feedback report includes a skill gap analysis where it shows their objective skills as assessed by CapsimInbox compared to their self-assessment that they provided. So finally, after you've kind of seen this, I'd like to really spend a little bit more time giving you a closer look at one of the components that I'm quite excited about when it comes to CapsimInbox, and that is this IDP Builder, so an individual development plan builder. This is the part of CapsimInbox that takes students through a self-guided process where they take the information they just received on their skills, and it helps them build a customized personal development plan. And so as you can see in this IDP Builder, it begins with a short instructional video to set up successful development. So it's giving them broad tips and tactics on how to receive feedback, how to think through it, and then how to apply it for their own skill development efforts. They're also provided a list of their skill scores that's just received from CapsimInbox, and these are also rank ordered by their developmental need. And from this, students choose where they want to focus their developmental efforts. Because the idea is you want to get students to participate and have ownership over their development, so they choose which skill they would like to focus upon. So let's just take a look at what happens if we chose evaluating consequences, the top skill to develop. Each of these skills, once they're chosen, are then linked to evidence-based developmental tactics. Now, I realize there's a lot of text on the screen right now, but the reason I wanted to show you this is to highlight how detailed these developmental suggestions really are. Right? So each of these skills has this very, very in-depth developmental tactics that are presented, and these are just part of one that I'm showing you right now for evaluating consequences. So each of these sets of developmental tactics are kind of structured in a similar way. They begin with a deeper definition around what that skill is. They also present ways to learn about that skill, the focal skill that was chosen, as well as ways to practice those skills. And last but not least, they're provided students highly specific and very practical tips to start immediately improving upon these chosen skills, as you can see here. The idea here is to lessen the load on faculty members, right, to deliver developmental feedback and tactics, as well as to engage students in their own development, which is increasingly the way development happens in today's organizations. There has to be a lot of ownership over change. So back to this process of the individual development plan builder. Students receive this developmental tactics, they can read through it. The very first step after that is to have them reflect on their chosen skill. So here they're asked to identify 2 to 3 reasons why the skill is relevant to their career. Think of some situations where the skill might be used in their life, school, job, other kinds of relevant situations. So after we get them to reflect on their skills, then it moves to setting the actual developmental goal. So here they're asked a series of short questions that then automatically build a SMART goal for development. I found this extremely valuable because over the years, I've really noticed students struggle to create high quality developmental goals. It's just something that seems to be difficult for them. So by just answering a series of questions here, a customized SMART goal is built for them. And you can see that at the bottom of the screen. So finally, after setting the goal, students then are cued to create their plan, their action plan. So here are the interaction steps to take for improving their skill. The developmental tactic is again shown here that they can use to cue and facilitate thinking of their own action steps they'd like to take. It's truncated here on screen, so it will fit, but the whole entire developmental tactic is shown to students. And so as they go through and they add as many steps as they think they need, and identifying important resources that might be required, as well as an end date, and they kind of work through their own action plan. The next step is simply to complete it, hit print, and now they have a customized report at hand that they could then turn into you, the instructor, and more importantly, they can keep for their own professional development in the future. And you can see examples of this customized feedback report that's provided. So I really hope that you found this brief overview insightful. Again, my plan was to really give you a feel for what CapsimInbox assesses and why these skills are measured and why they're important, as well as kind of the immersive, engaging nature of this experience that's presented to students themselves. I'd like to kick it back over to Carter, if you're ready.
I am. Thank you, Eric. All right, excellent. Thanks. One thing I really enjoyed actually doing ethical decision making, going through the process. Every message that was included in this is something that I've seen in my 24 years of management in this industry, and so and the answers are not cut and dry and not immediately obvious. So I thought it was an extremely realistic experience. All right, as I mentioned before, we have multiple versions of CapsimInbox. The interface of each is really the same as what Dr. Deardoff just showed us. We present to students with a range of emails, instant messages. Each one of them asks the student to self-assess in the beginning with their own estimation of their skill sets. And each one of them presents to the student an IDP Builder at the end. Each one of the versions has a different scenario, and it measures different skills and competencies. The first two versions we developed were general management and people management. General management's focus on leadership skills such as organization, communication, and problem solving, and others. This is really popular in a lot of OB courses, management, and business capstone courses as well. CapsimInbox people management measures the same skills, plus several competencies that make it really attractive for HR-specific courses. Many schools are using these as pre- and post-test assessments at the course or program level, and it's used for student development and also assurance of learning purposes. The other exciting piece I hinted at in the beginning is the flexibility of this tool. We've created an authoring platform to allow professors to work with our product team to build their own version of CapsimInbox to provide a truly unique experience for their students, and also to allow them to measure any skill that their program or their course needs to track. We're working with a couple key programs now to develop some really super interesting content there for their programs. If you're interested in learning more about CapsimInbox ethical decision making or any of these versions, please just type the word demo into the question box or the chat box, and we will reach out to you and schedule some time to talk. All right, so we want to open it up for questions. I know I've seen a few pop across the screen. Actually, one relates to accreditation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So the question's around, can this be used for accreditation?
Right.
Thank you. Absolutely. There are a number of schools that are already doing that, using it for accreditation. So if you have any type of learning goal that's related to some of the skills that we've presented earlier, and I imagine you do, at my business school we have learning goals around problem solving and decision making, another one around critical thinking, and of course one around leadership and ethics. So this can completely be brought to bear there, and you're getting percentile information to students.
Right. Good. Okay. Let's see. Got a couple administrative stuff. When is this available? It's available now. In fact, the ethical decision making was made available to anybody who has a professor account with us yesterday, and we've already run some beta tests, so anybody can add it to their course immediately. The other two have been available for a few months now. We've got several thousand responses in the system already. All right. How would we use this in class?
Oh, that's a good question. So how would you roll this out in class? Well, it's pretty flexible. I should probably step back here. I've used the other two versions in multiple courses so far, and let's see, 4 different courses. And I beta tested the ethical decision making in a course I'm teaching right now, and also have some colleagues that have tried it out. So it's pretty flexible because it's an online experience. So in my own course, I've assigned it as kind of a homework assignment that they had to do between weeks when we met. And then I required in most of my courses, what I do is I require participation, and then I do a quick debrief. And incidentally, Capsim has both a kickoff and a debrief deck that's available to professors that you can use if you choose to do that in class. They actually have the PowerPoint decks for you. I usually have people do that as a homework assignment, and then I have them go through the IDP Builder, produce their customized development plan, and then I have them upload it to my LMS system. We use D2L. And then so basically I do a cross check to keep them accountable. I have other colleagues that allow the entire process to be completely self-directed to the students, where they take the intro and debrief decks that Capsim provides and put those up online for students to go through. So it can be used in a variety of ways, but that's the one that I found to be really efficient. And I've kind of queried my students on the side about their reactions to it, trying to prompt as heavily as I can things that they don't like, right? And the feedback's been highly, highly favorable. The only time I ever get room for improvement, it's sort of like, well, my email program that I use at home is slightly different. Well, of course, it's a simulated experience. Most people have been very pleased with it.
Cool. All right, I've got probably 12 questions on cost. I'm gonna tease you with that. I'll tell you about that, but I want to get to some of the meatier questions right now. So how do we know this is valid?
Oh, that's a good one. So the question is, how do we know this is valid? That's a great question. It's one you should always ask. I know I do. The development of each one of these versions of CapsimInbox, and the reason why I know this is because Capsim's asked me to sort of oversee the validation of these, and my background's industrial psychology, so this is what we do. The development followed traditional test development processes. It involved generating items, having subject matter experts review these items for content validity. These subject matter experts, were scholars that have taught these courses and researched in these subject areas. And then beyond the test development process, then after beta testing and collecting information, you did all the common psychometrics that are involved, right? Looking at item responses and difficulty levels and reliability and these sorts of things. And what I also find, what I'm really impressed with, is that Capsim's collected information on how well scores in CapsimInbox relate to stuff that matters. So actual grades, as well as even job performance from graduate students. So that's pretty fantastic, and the evidence is really favorable. Part of the reason why I continue to use it. Hopefully that answered your question.
All right, so here's a good one.
Oh, may I say one more?
Sure.
So Capsim, I assume, because a lot of the other products have this, has technical synopses that are associated with a lot of the products.
Oh yeah, we do. And we provide that whenever this question is asked, and I don't have your expertise with me when it's presented to me. Let's see. What was the one I was just going to ask you? It was something about engagement. My students lack in engagement. How is ownership tasked?
That's a good question. So the question is around the students are less engaged than we would like them to be. Try to rephrase it if I can. Yeah. So this is interesting. So one of the issues that we know, I've done my own research around business school curriculum for a number of years now, and it's interesting. So one of the key problems is we kind of know the skills that we should focus on in driving up in our students, right? Employers are telling us we know these sorts of things. Yes, there's struggles to integrate it into business school curriculum because we only have a certain amount of time with them. A lot of our efforts are driving up knowledge. Right? We don't have as much time to drive up skills. And then there's the flip side of the challenge of getting students to really own up to it, right? But the very first step, if you look to the decades and decades of research on professional development, the very first step of any kind of engagement is to get them to drive up accurate self-awareness, right? Unfortunately, it's been well researched that people tend to think they're a lot more skilled than they are. The research is so clear on this, they've even named that effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Some of you might have heard of it. So we've got to kind of give students accurate, objective information that they can bounce against what they think of themselves. That's the very first step, because if they realize there's that gap, it kind of wakes them up. And then the second thing to engage them is, over the years, I've tried so many different things in my own class. And case studies can be great. They can be fun. They can be in depth if you've got a good class that discusses a lot of, has good discussion. But, I was really looking for tools that would do other kinds of hands-on experiences. And that's why I've leaned over the last maybe 7 or 8 years to using a lot of simulation-based experiences. Because you can't not be engaged when you're in a simulation-based experience. It sort of forces you to do this. And, for the most part, the way the IDP Builder is structured, it's doing as much as it can to lead students down the path of having some ownership over their own development, right? They're forced to answer questions, to choose a skill, and these sorts of things. So, it's doing as much as it possibly can. I know it's a long-winded answer, but that's something that's close to my heart, so I couldn't stop talking. I apologize.
The other thing about engagement is that the tool itself is actually a naturally engaging instrument. It's interesting to play. I had my wife do this, and she outscored me on communication, so she holds that over me all the time. One question. Let's see. Can we use the same tool for pre and post-test purposes?
Yes, you may. So what's interesting here is if in one of my classes, we actually did this because when it first came out a few months ago, the people management version, we beta tested it twice. So if your course is across the semester, right, you could easily use both of these, and students, they're not going to remember specific emails and these sorts of things. It'll look somewhat familiar, but they won't be able to remember it. If it's a much shorter period of time, then you may want to use different versions of the inbox. Not because they can remember specific things, but it just makes it a more engaging experience to students. Now, I'll turn it back to you, Carter, because I know you guys have told me that there's talk of making parallel versions of some of.
Yeah, we're going to have equivalent items so that you can actually use the same version of Inbox, but have a completely different experience.
And so that would be optimal. You could take the general management twice, or people management twice, or ethical decision making twice, and also have parallel items. So it would be a different experience for the students. Great question.
All right, can I find a demo at the Capsim website? You can indeed, and in fact, we have what we call a 10-minute demo. You can go through and play it, play a couple questions on your own just to get a feel for how it works. If you want a more comprehensive review of how certain items will factor into certain skills, we would take you through a demo and do that for you. How many ethical simulations do you have? We have in our core business simulations, we have plugins, and the plugins and modules will allow for you to make ethical decisions in the context of the simulation itself. And the decisions that you make will actually impact your performance in the simulation. Those are pretty interesting, and we're actually building new ones all the time. So be happy to show that to you guys as well if you want to look at that. Lots of people want a copy of the deck, Dr. Dearth. Do we normally do that? I'll have to.
Yes, we just in the past when I've given webinars, you guys have sent the link to the recording and the deck. That answers a lot of questions. I can see them up there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cost.
You should address that.
I will. Can we have a student do the demo with us, or should only the faculty see the demo? Yeah, only the faculty should really sit through that.
Yeah, the demo the short demo, the quick one. I'd encourage you as a faculty or administrator to check it out. I passed it on to some of my colleagues at my university. It's very quick, just to give you a feel for the student experience. You could have students look at that, but when I tested in my class, I just had the students actually go through it, because the demo is really to give you a feel for what the student experience is like. It's not a full-blown version of it.
I think we talked about having a practice round to let them have a couple emails just to understand how the tool works before they jump into it as well. The video will be available of this webinar. Does each student receive the same set of facts, or is this some sort of customization?
So if I'm interpreting that question right, within the assessment experience, it's similar, right? They're reviewing the same set of emails, the same files, the same instant messages, right? All students. But if you're talking about the facts that are provided afterwards, right, the feedback, that will be customized to how well they performed in the simulation itself. So not only is there percentile information on how well they perform relative to the hundreds of people that are in the database currently, it also provides customized text descriptions to them to help them better work through the different pieces of feedback they're getting, the numerical data and the graphical data.
Okay, so cost. We have a couple different models here and that we've considered and are put into place. A single use of CapsimInbox is $19.99. That is usually student paid. Sometimes it is university paid, but that really comes down to your own situation and how you want to do this. If you want to do a pre and a post test, we give you half off of the second test. So that puts the total cost at about $29.99 for the pre and post. If you want unlimited inbox use, that is also available, and we do that under a site license, and that would really depend on the situation at hand, how often you want to use it, how you want to use it, and then how many students you have and things like that. But more than happy to engage in a conversation about that and about your specific circumstance and how you want to implement this. Okay, that's pretty much it. I mean, can students cheat by sharing the situation? Oh. The flip side of that is, can they work in groups? We didn't design this to be worked in.
Yeah, that's a great question. So can they do this in groups? You could certainly have them do it in a group. It's designed to be an individual assessment, though. The real value of any skill-based assessment, and because they're focused on ethical decision-making skills in this one, or general management, or the people management one, it's really around giving feedback to that person, right? You want folks to develop as individuals, right? And all these are individual level skills. There are other products that around team development that I've used as well. I mean, Capsim has one called Teammate that you can use if you want to really develop up the team level type competencies.
Right.
But this one's really focused on the individual, and that's where it's optimal to use.
Okay. All right. So any other questions, guys? We will answer. We'll keep this open for a while, and then we'll reach out to you directly if we didn't get a chance to answer your question verbally. We will definitely answer it via email. Also, feel free to call us anytime, and happy to talk.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Tudor.
You're welcome. My pleasure.